Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. And welcome back to this series where we have been looking at how local governments that I have observed have gone about getting a budget for maintaining their water-sensitive urban design assets. And we've been talking about this process here. It's not to say it's the only process, but it's a process that I've observed work, that I've observed other local governments, do and make happen for them. Now, in the last episode, we finished off down the end of the process here. And in this episode and the next, I'm going to pick out two topics where when we initially talked through this, I tried not to give too much of my personal opinion as to exactly which decision, when there were decisions to be made, which decision a local government should make. Because I wanted to make that first cut for you listening to it, an opportunity for you to think through and to try and to make those decisions without me unfairly biasing you based on my own opinions, right? But I can't resist sharing my thoughts on some of this stuff. So in this episode and the next, we're gonna get into that a little. So if you haven't watched the previous episodes, now might be the time to go back and watch them, just so you get a chance to answer a couple of these questions for yourself before I go and, as I said, unduly influence you. Because my opinion is only my opinion, and your experience for your particular situation might give a better answer, and I don't want to inappropriately sway you here. So, you've been forewarned, now let's get into it. So, back in episode 124, we talked about deciding which department should be responsible for making sure that maintenance gets done. Not physically who should do the work as in contractors versus in-house crews, but which department of the three likely candidates, being stormwater drainage maintenance, parks maintenance, and natural areas maintenance, which of those three candidates should actually be responsible for this. And we talked about how the logical place to go with this is to figure out what the common maintenance activities are, what the common skill sets needed to do this, what the frequency, that's how they become common, what the frequency of these maintenance activities and skill sets is, and then to pick the department that most closely aligns with those skill sets. My opinion on this matter is this. I think that when it comes to any sort of vegetated water-sensitive urban design asset, bioretention systems, wetlands, vegetated swales, sediment basins, my opinion is that the vast majority of the regular maintenance is vegetation management, litter removal, maybe a bit of sediment reprofiling, maybe a little bit of scour fixing, but it's primarily in the vegetation and litter space. And for me, that says it's either initially got to be parks or it's got to be the natural areas crew. The stormwater drainage crews, in my experience in most local governments, are more equipped to do mechanical cleaning out of drains and pipes and those sorts of things. And you might occasionally need those skills in maintaining, say, a bioretention system, but it's less regular. The vegetation management is every single month, right? It's doing it really regularly and keeping on top of it. So my opinion is that we should be giving responsibility to a crew who has that skill set. Backing up that opinion are a few other observations on my part over the years of spending time talking to people from each of these different departments. I've observed, and this is not a universal rule, there are exceptions to every observation like this, but I've observed a couple of things. The first one of which is that more often than not, if I go and talk to someone from the stormwater drainage department and the parks department and the natural areas department, is that intuitively, it always feels like the natural areas, people from the natural areas teams really intuitively quickly get how, say, a vegetated system like a bioretention system works. They really quickly like, oh, that does that, that does that. Like they seem to have a feel for it. The parks teams, pretty good feel for it. The stormwater drainage teams, and I believe this is just because of the skills that they're used to using. This is not an inherent, like stormwater drainage crews can't do this sort of thing. No, it's not that. Just inherently, because they are more used to approaching stuff from this mechanical cleaning, this removal of sediment from pipes point of view, seem a little bit less comfortable with these vegetated assets up front. So this comfort, this initial like, yep, okay, I can do this, this headspace that I've felt from talking to the natural areas teams and to a slightly lesser extent the parks teams, reinforces to me that it should be one of those two departments. Second observation is the fact that when I talk to people from each of those three departments, I have noticed a trend, there's always exceptions to this rule, I've noticed a trend that when you start talking about how much will it cost to maintain these assets, that the stormwater drainage teams always, not always, very often, seem to estimate a higher cost to do this maintenance than either the parks or the natural areas teams do. And I believe that, again, comes back to the skill set that we are used to using. The stormwater drainage teams are used to using this skill set where it's mechanical cleaning, it's getting machinery in there. It's really quite intensive and intrusive and invasive, whereas the natural areas crews, on the other hand, tend to estimate much lower costs, but they're using a much more adaptive, ecologically based skill set. And so I think it really, it starts to tie in here. So long as, of course, the process that's being approved, that's being suggested by the natural areas teams can work, then it seems logical to hand responsibility to them. If they have an idea and a process that is going to be less costly, then it would seem logical to hand responsibility down that point of view. And that's my thoughts. That's why my preference is that this stuff gets given to natural areas crews, or that if it's not going to, if it's going to be kept within a stormwater drainage crew, then what we do is skill up with someone in that team who has that ecological and that natural areas background, who can bring that approach within the stormwater drainage team. Because it might, for example, a flip side to this, flipping around, it might make more sense to have a stormwater drainage team looking after it because it is fundamentally a stormwater asset, but then we need to get the right skill set in the right place. But my opinion is natural areas teams are the way to go. Failing that, parks teams, least preference stormwater teams. That's my opinion. What do you think? Seriously, what do you think? What have you seen work? I mentioned in this episode quite a few things that I had observed. The observation that natural areas people who I've talked to seem to intuitively feel more comfortable with this stuff. Again, I can think of one very specific exception to that with someone who comes from the stormwater drainage side of things, but is very passionate about the waterway health stuff and gets the vegetation management side of stuff. So I can think of a session. I'm not going to mention you by name, but I hope you can figure out who you are there. I know you're watching. But there have been a few things. So I had this observation of natural areas skilled people being more likely to intuitively feel comfortable with maintenance of this stuff. I had this observation that the stormwater drainage skilled people are more likely to estimate higher maintenance costs. Does that stuff ring true with you? Because if it doesn't, then it really challenges. If that's not something that you've seen before, then that might be a reason to completely disregard my opinions on this matter. Because ultimately, you, and specifically the local government as a whole, all three departments, as we talked about in episode 124, all three departments need to come to this consensus together. And my opinion doesn't really matter. And I'll leave you on that. Have a good one.